WCHQ brings you Community Spotlight with Barry Steiger. A look at events happening throughout Kentuckiana and the people behind those events.
There's not a more visual art form than dance, and there's not a less visual medium than radio, but somehow we're going to try to make that work today. My guest is Amberly Simpson, dancer, aerialist, and choreographer, who, for our purposes, is going to tell us about the inaugural 2019 season of Ambo Dance Theater's debut performance, There Will Always Be Strings. Thank you for being with me today. Ambo Dance Theater was just established this past April.
Yes, actually, I'd been creating choreography for a while, originally just under my name, Amberly M. Simpson and Dancers, but I wanted to launch a more formal company because I'm wanting to help grow the adult professional modern dance community around here. So once I actually created the company, we did a couple of smaller gigs, one at Churchill Downs for their opening night. With the Louisville Dance Series, we did another performance, and then we wanted to do our first evening length as a company.
Your work is often interdisciplinary in nature, combining elements of theater, film, photography, and visual arts to create works that touch on social issues and the human condition.
My work tends to be in the modern to postmodern range, so I like to integrate a lot of other art forms in there as well. So sometimes when you come to a show that I'm doing, you'll get projection that's going on that's integrated into the performance. You might have really non-traditional use of sound. For example, in our show, there's a section where they are literally just dancing to the sounds that are made by these balloons in the performance. Just depending on what the work is asking for, we'll try and incorporate those elements, which whatever is going to most clearly communicate the message that we're trying to get across.
And what is that message?
In this case, we're really just looking at relationships, not necessarily romantic relationships, but relationships between all sorts of people, your relationship with your family, your friends, your work, and yes, romantic relationships too. Our show comes from, or at least is inspired by, research in attachment theory. My background was actually in psychology.
This sounds oh so Freudian.
Not super Freudian, actually, a bit after his time, but I studied psychology as an undergrad, so I'm by no means a professional. I was going to pursue psychology, but then decided that really I was not going to be happy in life if I didn't pursue dance. Because I have that background, I like to incorporate elements, so I've been doing a lot of reading and research into more attachment theory based stuff, and kind of the general bare basics are that there are 4 main attachment styles that they've identified. Secure attachment, which is about half of people, is kind of what the ideal person would hope for. So you have a positive view of self, you have a positive view of others, you generally make and form relationships pretty easily. You've got healthy boundaries established.
Well, I flunked that one. What are the other 3?
It's okay, I'm flunking that one too. Yeah, the other 3 are anxious, preoccupied attachment, dismissive avoidant attachment, and fearful avoidant attachment. And without going into too much detail...
Oh, let's.
Well, essentially, they are all different ways of experiencing unhealthy attachment to the people in our lives, and sometimes even to things like our work. For example, in anxious, preoccupied attachment, that is generally, again, to be a little overly vague. These are the types of people that tend to have a negative view of themselves and a positive view of others. So they tend to also then rely on positive feedback from other relationships in order to gauge their self-worth and their value. So these are the people that you might see as overly clingy, or needing too much attention, or perhaps being overly sensitive to the things you say. Again, this is a very big generalization because there's tons of research behind all of this.
And yet so many people leap to mind in that description, but go on.
Oh, no, absolutely. I mean, the other 3 attachment styles, you've still got the other half of the population that's filling those out. So there's plenty of people that you're going to interact with that really do meet these descriptions. Dismissive avoidant attachment, those are the people that tend to have a positive view of themselves, but a negative view of others. The people that tend to go, well, I'm fine by myself. I don't need a close relationship with other people. Like, oh, I don't need those relationships in my life. They try and just rely on themselves.
I'll take the burnt piece.
These are people that, again, overly generalizing, they have not had consistent relationships with their caretakers growing up. So they learned to not need to rely on them. And so then in adulthood, when they're trying to form other friendships and other relationships of any sort, they tend to say, oh, well, I don't need that. I don't need that. I can do this by myself.
Well, my mother left when I was 6 months old, so I should probably be in this dance troupe. How is it that you somehow take all of this psychological data? How do you turn that into a dance?
With a lot of trial and error. I actually use a collaborative model for dance creation, which essentially I don't generate all the movement myself. We might come into rehearsal and I tell my dancers, we're going to explore what it means to feel a sense of desperation, to interact with someone, that when they're gone, you feel insecure, so you need to be near them, and so play with that dynamic, and they might develop a duet with each other, or I might put it in a group of 4. So I'll pair them off, or I might have them work individually.
And these can be improvisational things, and probably are at some point.
Oh, I mean, all choreography starts out as improvisation. You have to generate material, and so you'll reject some of it and keep the parts you like. And then eventually I'll just have them form a phrase out of the things that they're generating. They'll present that phrase to the group. I usually videotape them. I'll go back and I'll look at them later. Sometimes I'll keep the whole phrase. Sometimes I'll just take little bits and pieces. Sometimes I'll merge different phrases that people have developed and make some kind of an overall phrase out of both of those materials. Sometimes I'll throw it out altogether and it just doesn't work. And that's part of what's great about collaborative creation, is you get to see not only my own perspective, because I'm creating movement right along with them and with my dancers, but also you get to see what are other people's thoughts and insights into this topic, because I can't individually as one person by any means address all the different facets of something as complex as this. There's a wealth of knowledge and diversity that the people that I'm rehearsing with are bringing into the room.
How do you know whether something is working or not working? What if one of your collaborative dancers think, well, this is wonderful, and you think it isn't?
I tend to work first with we'll do several rehearsals where all we're doing is generating. We're not putting much together. We're not constructing the dance yet. So that way, once we've done all that movement research, then we go back and look at it. So a lot of the time, there's not a very big attachment to the movement you're creating in the beginning. You kind of learn to create and let it go, and then revisit later. And when we revisit, more often than not, we'll edit stuff. We'll look at, okay, what's the intention behind that movement? Is that really communicating this relationship in the way that we're trying to? Sometimes I even assign little reading assignments, or like, here, look at this article. Now and I'll highlight certain lines of like, these are the poignant parts that you need to really develop and bring out. So it's kind of a constant loop of create and feedback, and edit and edit and edit until we've gotten to a place with the movement that it's reading the way we want it to.
Your performance's goal is to bring us a, quote, raw, intimate, and vulnerable examination of how we develop attachment and how it manifests in our adult lives.
So the show is actually divided into 3 parts, which I have nicknamed, I guess you could say, development, which focuses on especially our younger years, our formative years of our life, where we're primarily working with a caregiver and we're developing our general understanding of the relationships in our lives. Are they reliable? Are they warm or are they cold? That sort of thing. And just various experiences that we might have that influence our attachment when we become adults, which leads us to part 2 of the show I call enactment. That's when we have finished out the formative years of our lives for the most part, and we have a more firmly set attachment style. So
what age would that generally be?
With brain development, usually it's in the late 20s, early 30s, depending on what research you're looking at. It's also kind of, you can't really say when that's firmly set, also because you can work to change your attachment style. If you've got an unhealthy attachment style, you can go to therapy and work through what experiences you've had. That said, like, changing your attachment style is not the norm either. But I would say like really like into your late 20s is when you're getting a more solidified view of what your attachment and relational style is like.
Which is the age actually I was when I started exploring Buddhism, which spends much of its focus on attachments. Let's talk a bit about you. You seem to have the ideal background to conjure such a production. In addition to an impressive dance history, you hold multiple degrees in creative writing, psychological sciences, and English language arts. Somehow you're able to incorporate all of that into this production. How did Ambo Dance Theatre get its name? Might there be some connection to your first name?
So Ambo got its name off of my childhood nickname. I was not the most fun as a child. I had really awful colic for the first 9 weeks of my life, so constant screaming. Then after that, I was one of those kids that was like, I'm not even going to crawl. I'm just going to get up and run around and fall down, but cool, whatever, I'm going to get back up again. So
who knew that you would end up in the arts?
Yeah, for real. I think they probably realized when I was like 4 or 5 and wrote my first play for my family to come and see. It was not the most riveting. It didn't get the greatest reviews.
Most little girls are playing dress up, and you're writing plays, so you were ahead of the curve.
Well, I played dress up. I just also did it in the mud. But yeah, Ambo came from a childhood nickname that my mom and her side of the family gave me because it was a comparison to Sylvester Stallone in Rambo, though I wasn't necessarily...
Without the assault rifles.
Yes, a little less weaponry involved, but equally as elaborate of a reign of terror.
And how did this particular production get its name? There will always be strings.
I started exploring this idea of threads and interconnectivity of things because all the things in our lives are connected in some way. How we respond to things may relate back to very early childhood experiences.
7 degrees of separation?
Yeah, and that as well. There's this idea of everything we experience, and especially how we respond to it, in some way kind of builds upon itself. And there's relationships that we're not always seeing that kind of tie things together and that really formed who we are. So the idea of there will always be strings, which kind of leads me to part 3 of the show, which is called rearrangement. So that's looking at what are the challenges of changing your attachment style once you are a fully formed adult, and also even examining that within a 21st century lifestyle where we're curating our lives on social media. There's not quite as much face-to-face interaction in certain regards. What are the challenges that come with trying to confront this unhealthy attachment style if we have an unhealthy attachment style? How do we go about changing it? What does the process of changing it look like? What kind of feelings are evoked from that? So within that dynamic, just even from facing my own demons and trying to confront these things, because I am someone that falls into the unhealthy attachment style category, but I'm also working very hard to work through that. And what I've learned in working through some of those things is that even though we can kind of work through the trauma that may have caused that to begin with, the threads of it are always there. We're always still connected to those things. It's just about the attachment and the relationship we have with those experiences as well.
In the final moments, tell me when the date and of the performance and where it's going to be.
Yeah, the show is about a month away, September 13th, 14th, and 15th. That's a Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. The Friday and Saturday show are in the evening at 8 p.m., and the Sunday show is at 4 p.m. Also on Sunday, we have a modern dance masterclass taking place from 1 to 2:30 p.m. So you could go on Sunday, take the masterclass from 1 to 2:30, grab a little bite to eat, and swing back in and watch the show all in one day. But all of those are taking place at the Highland Community Campus in their event hall / theater space. That's on Breckenridge and Barrett, and both the show and the masterclass are just $15 to attend.
And if someone wants to contact you or become involved in your group?
The easiest way is either to reach out on social media or to just shoot us an email at ambodancetheater@gmail.com.
I want to thank my guest, Amberly Simpson, Artistic Director of Ambo Dance Theatre, which will launch its inaugural production, There Will Always Be Strings, September 13th through the 15th at Highland Community Campus. Break a leg or whatever it is that dancers do break.
You've been listening to Community Spotlight with Barry Steiger, a look at events happening throughout Kentuckiana and the people behind those events. A community service of WCHQ. All local, all the time.